Hi, and welcome to Philosophy with Phil, with me, Phil Cohen. This week we're starting the first of our 4 videos on the Parshahs that we read in Shul around this time. And the first Parsha that we're going to look at is Parshah Shekalim. And we're going to look and see how that relates to the issue of individual identity, consciousness, and basically what makes one person different from another. The shekel, the Parshah Shekalim, relates to a tax that was levied on the Jewish people to fund the running and the upkeep of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and then when they entered into the land of Israel and set up the temple, built the temple, it was the money was used to fund that. But my issue is that every single male had to give the same amount of money, the same coin. Why? If you were rich, rich or poor didn't matter. Why? Why did everyone give the same? Why was everyone treated equally? Well, in other words, if we turn the question around a little bit, you could ask, what does make us different? What makes us special? How am I different from other people that I know? Well, the obvious answer is genetics. I've got a different body. I've got slightly different genes to my siblings. I've got slightly different genes to my parents. And even identical twins. I don't have a twin, but even identical twins have some genetic differences. But if someone were to have, say, a heart transplant or an organ transplant or even a limb transplant, you wouldn't say that person was different. You wouldn't say that they'd assumed the identity of the donor. No. So it's not our bodies that make us different in any meaningful way, at least anyway. But what about our minds? What if we were to have a brain transplant? Now, I don't think we'll ever get to the stage where we have the technology for brain transplants. But what if we could? Would that mean I take on the recipient would take on the identity of the owner and make them different? Well, I don't think so. It's easy to say, but actually, if you extrapolate that forwards, that would mean that something like a newborn baby who has no memories or has no connections, has no knowledge, would be somehow not an individual in its own right. Well, I've got a bit of a problem with that. So it's not the body and it's not the mind or the brain. Then, as many Greek philosophers would have us believe, it is the soul. The soul that's given to us by God is what makes us different and makes us behave in the way that we do. Judaism has a problem with that, though. And it's based on what we were discussing last week when we were talking about God. God, we said, when we talked about God as being echad, as being unified, God is indivisible, and God cannot be separated out into different chunks. And in Judaism, we believe that the soul is given to us as like a spark or a component of God. So if that little bit of God, if that little bit of my soul is a part of God, and that little bit of that soul in my wife and my rabbi and my neighbour is also a part of God, all those souls have got to be the same. So they can't be different, and they can't be making us different. So if it's not the body, if it's not the mind, and it's not the soul, well, what is it? For help, we'll go to Rav Eliyahu Eliezer Dessler. He lived in the late 19th and mid 20th centuries, and he's famous for writing a series of essays entitled Mistoch Eliyahu, which has been translated as Strive for the Truth. And he was a very much an advocate of the Mussar movement, which was a movement that encouraged not just character development and developing people to be better people. For them, by suppressing things like anger and pride, they would make them better people, better Jews, but also make them more objective in their approach to their Torah studies and their decision-making process. And by making them more objective in their decision-making process, that would free up, if you like, their rotzon, as we call it in Hebrew, or their, what you might call, free will. Let me give you an example. If you're in a situation where imagine you're in a situation where you've come home from work and it's late, and there are two restaurants that are open. There's a kosher restaurant which is just about closing, and then there's the 24/7 McDonald's non-kosher restaurant. The kosher restaurant has got some scraps left over, really on their last legs. It's the end of the day, and quite frankly, they're looking to shut down. The other place is 24/7, is just about getting into full flow, and has got fresh meat on tap, if you can call it meat. Which do you go for? Now, what Rav Dessler would say is that your free will at that moment defines who you are, and different people in exactly the same circumstance may either go for one or the other, or dither, or maybe even go throw in the towel and go home and make their own supper. Some people may sort of walk towards one and then retreat and then go back to the other, and vice versa, or whatever it is. But that is what defines us, and that's what influences our soul, which in turn animates our bodies and our minds to be able to implement those decisions. And it's our rotzen, it's our free will, and the way it controls our actions that makes each one of us different. Why do we need free will? What is it there for? Well, it came into being back to in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were quite happy in the garden, basking in the glory of God. And God had told them that there was a tree, an eitz hadas, that they shouldn't touch. Shouldn't eat, beg your pardon. Important difference. Along comes the snake, and sort of talks them into going ahead and eating it. But the logic behind that was actually quite significant, because for them and for many others in Jewish history, particularly in the Bible, biblical history, they found themselves in a lifestyle that they found too easy. For them, there were no decisions to make. They knew exactly what to do because they were basking in the glory of God. God was evident. They had no free will. So what they thought was, well, look, if we eat from this tree, we'll gain our free will. We'll be introduced to the concept of good and bad. And then we'll be able to make better decisions. And we'll decide. We'll probably carry on and do what we were doing just before, but we would have done it by striving and overcoming our free will and overcoming negative influences to go ahead and do this. And wouldn't that be better? To make these achievements and to reach this level through striving rather than getting a leg up from God? The answer is no. Because God's not interested in striving or leg up, or whether you strive or whether you get a leg up. He's interested in how close you can come and what you can achieve. I'll end by pointing out that it's interesting that this law of the shekel was given in Egypt. Egypt, Mitzrayim, is described as Beis Avodim, the house of slaves. Even the Egyptians and even Pharaoh were slaves. Slaves are people that have no free will, that have no free choice, to have no decisions to make because their decisions are made for them. And so it's no coincidence that God chose Egypt as the place to give this commandment. I wish you Shabbat Shalom. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you'll join me again next time round for Parshahs Zochar, where we'll be talking about evil. Bye.